The screaming began at 03 for 7 hours, ship time. Fleet Commander Vector of the Hegemony Force Strike Force jerked awake in his command pod, chitin scraping against metal as his 6 limbs scrambled for purchase. The sound cut through the hull of his flagship like plasma through flesh, a human sound, raw and primal, transmitted across the void through captured communication rays. Report. Vector-S mandibles clicked rapid-fire commands as he scuttled toward the bridge. His second-in-command, Wing Leader Cass, met him halfway, her carapace trembling with what could only be described as unease. Sir, the Human Research Station Kepler for the Bravo is single quotes S. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The screaming started 12 minutes ago and hasn't stopped. Vector-S compound eyes focused on the holographic display showing their target, a modest scientific outpost orbiting a dead world, staffed by fewer than 200 humans. Intelligence reports had been clear: minimal defenses, advanced research facilities, and most importantly, the prototype FTL drive that could revolutionize hegemony expansion. The screaming continued, an endless wail that seemed to burrow into his exoskeleton and vibrate against his nerve clusters. Other sounds joined it: male grinding, something that might have been laughter, and beneath it all, a rhythmic pounding like massive hearts beating in unison. Could be a trap, Kes suggested, but her voice carried doubt. Humans are known for their deception. Vector had studied the species extensively during his rise through the hegemony ranks. Humans were individually weak, short-lived, and technologically inferior. They compensated with numbers, cunning, and an inexplicable willingness to die for abstract concepts. But they were not known for whatever this was. The tactical display showed the station in detail: 5 interconnected habitat rings, a central research core, and defensive platforms that should have been neutralized by their advanced scouts 3 hours ago. Yet the electromagnetic signature suggested the station was not only operational, but running at 130% of normal power levels. Wing Leader Kess, status of Scout Pack Zeta, a pause, to long a pause, no contact for 14 minutes, sir. Their transponders went dark just before the screaming began. 12 elite hegemony scouts vanished without a distress signal. Vector-S primary eyes swiveled to study the data streams. The station's external sensors showed no signs of battle, damage, no debris fields, no evidence of the fierce resistance Scout Pack Zeta should have encountered. Increased scanner resolution. I want to know what's happening on that station. The enhanced scans revealed movement within the habitat rings, hundreds of heat signatures, moving in patterns that defied explanation. Some moved with the steady gait of humans at work, others seemed to dance or writhe, and still others moved with inhuman speed through corridors that should have been too narrow for such velocity. The screaming modulated, rising to a crescendo that made several bridge officers clutch their auditory organs. Then, impossibly, it was joined by other voices, dozens of them, hundreds. A chorus that shouldn't have been possible from a station with only 200 inhabitants. Sir, the communications officer reported, voice tight with fear. We're receiving a transmission, direct laser comm from the station. Display it. The hologram flickered to life, showing a human male with pale skin and dark hair. He appeared calm, even friendly, despite the cacophony continuing in the background. When he spoke, his voice was steady and professional. Greetings, Hegemony Forces. I am Dr. Marcus Kelburn, current senior researcher at Kepler 442 Bravo. We've been expecting you. The human's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to sharp in the display's blue light. We have something rather extraordinary to show you. Please, won't you come aboard? We're simply dying to meet you. The transmission cut, leaving only the screaming. Vector stood motionless for 30 seconds, processing what he'd witnessed. Then his training reasserted itself. Deploy the first assault wave. 600 troops, full combat gear. I want that station secured and their research data captured within the hour. As his forces prepared for assault, the screaming continued its endless song, and Vector tried to ignore the growing certainty that they were flying into something far worse than a trap. They were flying toward something that had been waiting for them. The first wave of hegemony shock troops breached the station's outer docking ring in over 3 hours. Squad leader Thekmer led the advance, his combat suit sensors painting targeting solutions across his visual field. As his troops poured through the airlock, the corridor beyond was wrong. The walls were covered in organic growth pulsing, wet, things that resembled neural tissue crossed with fungal networks. Emergency lighting cast everything in crimson, and the air recyclers produced a rhythmic wheeze that almost synchronized with the ongoing screams. Echoing through the station's comm system, atmospheric readings that were sub-vocalized into his. Calm, breathable for humans, toxic mix of nitrogen oxygen for us. Standard filtration protocols active, came the reply from his suit's AI. The squad advanced in formation, weapons ready, sensor rays scanning for threats. The corridor stretched ahead for 50 meters before branching into the station's central hub. But as they moved, Thicmer noticed something that made his cotton crawl. The organic growths were following their movement, bulging and contracting as they passed. Movement. Section 7. Trooper Vecchi raised his plasma rifle toward a side passage. A human figure emerged from the shadows, female, middle-aged, wearing a blood-stained lab coat. She walked with measured steps, hands at her sides, head tilted, at an angle that suggested a broken neck. When she spoke, her voice was conversational, even pleasant. "Welcome to Kepler 442 Bravo. I'm Dr. Yuki Nakamura. I died about 6 hours ago." She smiled, and black fluid ran from her mouth. "But I'm feeling so much better now." Thicmer's finger tightened on his trigger, but before he could fire, the human woman's head snapped fully round 180 degrees to look behind her. "Oh, the others are so excited to meet you. We've been preparing such wonderful things." The screaming intensified, and now Thicmer could tell it was coming from the passages ahead. Not just human voices, something else mixed in, something that hurt to hear. "Open fire," he commanded. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, striking the human woman's center mass. The energy discharge should have vaporized her torso, but instead, the beam seemed to splash against her like water. Where they hit, her flesh began to change, sprouting tendrils and eye-like growths that blinked in unison. "That tickles," she said, still smiling. Then she moved. The human woman covered the 15-meter distance in less than a second, moving with fluid grace that defied biology. Her hands, now sporting additional joints and metallic fingertips, reached for Trooper HFY. The soldier tried to dodge, but she adjusted her trajectory mid-leap with impossible precision. Her fingers punched through his combat armor like it was polymer sheeting. HFY's dying shriek joined the chorus as she lifted his 200-kilogram form with one hand and hurled him into the wall hard enough to crater the metal. The squad opened fire in earnest now, but more figures emerged from the passages ahead. Humans, but wrong. Some moved on too many joints. Others had limbs that extended far beyond normal length. One appeared to be wearing the uniform of a hegemony scout, but his face was a mass of writhing tentacles. Fall back to the airlocks," Thicmer ordered, but the retreat route was already cut off. Behind them, the corridor had filled with more of the twisted humans, moving with predatory patience. The battle was swift and brutal. Thicmer watched Trooper Venner get pulled into the organic growths on the walls, which parted like curtains to reveal mouths lined with metallic teeth. The soldier's armor was digested in seconds, but his screaming continued long after his body disappeared. Thicmer himself managed to kill 3 of the modified humans with concentrated plasma fire, but each death only seemed to excite the others. When his weapon overheated, one of them, a young human male whose chest cavity had been opened and filled with spinning mechanical components, approached with something resembling sympathy. "Don't worry," the thing said in perfect hegemony language. "It only hurts until you stop being yourself. Then it's wonderful. We're all so much more than we used to be." Thicmer tried to trigger his suit's self-destruct, but his finger wouldn't respond. Looking down, he saw thin filaments had emerged from the organic wall growths and penetrated his armor. They were already inside him. He realized with horror. "My name was Trevor Hollis," the human thing continued conversationally. "I was studying xenobiology before the improvement began. Now I know so much more. Would you like to know what we've learned about your species?" The last thing Thicmer saw before the filaments reached his brain was Trevor's face splitting open like a flower to reveal rows of shifting mechanical components. Underneath, back on the flagship, Fleet Commander Vector watched his tactical display as the first wave's life signs winked out one by one. In less than 8 minutes, 600 elite troops had been eliminated with no enemy casualties recorded. The screaming continued, now with new voices added to the chorus. Fleet Commander Vector's mandibles ground against each other as he studied the tactical display. 3 more assault waves, 1,800 troops total, had entered the station over the past 2 hours. None had returned. Worse, The screaming broadcast now included voices speaking in hegemony dialects, begging for death in languages the humans couldn't possibly know. Sir, Wing Leader Kess approached, her carapace pale with stress molting, long-range sensors, detecting energy buildup in the station's core. Power levels are now at 400% of normal capacity and climbing. Vector-S compound eyes focused on the data stream. The readings were impossible. The station's fusion reactor couldn't produce that kind of output without immediately suffering containment failure. Yet the energy signatures were unmistakably real and growing stronger by the minute. What's the status of our orbital bombardment platforms? Ready to fire on your command, sir. However, Kess hesitated. Intelligence suggests the humans. FTL research data is stored in the central core. Bombardment would destroy what we came to capture. The communications array crackled to life again. This time, the image that appeared was one of Vector-S own scout troopers, or what had been one. The creature's exoskeleton had been opened like a puzzle box, revealing modifications that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the voice was a perfect mimicry of proper military protocol. Fleet Commander Vector. This is Scout Pack Leader McIver reporting. The station is secure, requesting immediate reinforcement of all available troops. The humans have something wonderful to share with us. Vector knew McIver personally, had trained with him for 3 cycles before the scout's promotion. The creature on the screen bore his friend's memories, his mannerisms, even his trademark nervous tick of flexing his secondary arms. But behind its compound eyes, something else looked out, something hungry. The improvements hurt at first, the McIver thing continued. But then you understand. We were so limited before, Commander, trapped in these fragile shells, dependent on crude biochemistry. But the humans, they've learned to transcend such restrictions. They want to share their gifts. The transmission showed glimpses of the station's interior. The organic growths had spread throughout the corridors, forming a neural network that pulsed with bioluminescent signals. Hundreds of figures moved through. The passages, humans and hegemony troops working together, but all changed. All improved according to some incomprehensible design. Commander, the creature that had been McIver said, leaning closer to the camera, you really should come see this for yourself. We've discovered what the humans were researching. It's not faster than light travel. It's so much better. The transmission cut, but not before showing one final image. The station's central research lab, where dozens of figures worked around a massive device that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. The geometry was wrong, angles that folded in on themselves, surfaces that reflected things that weren't there. What in the void are they doing over there? Kess whispered. Before Vector could respond, the station's energy output spiked again. This time, the surge was accompanied by a pulse of something that registered on every sensor array simultaneously. Psi electromagnetic, gravitational, quantum, and several types of radiation that their instruments couldn't classify. The pulse washed over the hegemony fleet, and immediately, Vector knew something had changed. The bridge crew moved differently, their heads turning to track movement that wasn't there. One of his tactical officers began humming a human tune that none of them should have known. Sir, the communications officer reported, voice strangely flat. We're receiving new transmissions from the fleet. All ships reporting improvements in crew efficiency. Vector-S primary eyes swiveled to the fleet status display. Throughout his 20-ship armada, similar reports were coming in. Crew members working with unprecedented coordination, solving complex problems within human speed, volunteering for duties they'd never expressed interest in before. Lock down all ship-to-ship communications, Vector ordered. Impose communications blackout until further notice. But even as he gave the command, he could see it was too late. The changes were already spreading through his fleet like an infection, or an improvement, as his tactical officer had begun calling it. Speaking in perfect unison with the communications officer, the screaming from the station reached a new crescendo. But now Vector could hear the pattern in it. It wasn't random, it was a song. A hymn of transformation that bypassed the auditory cortex and spoke directly to something deeper. Something that recognized the truth of what it was hearing. Wing Leader Kess, he said, surprised at how calm his own voice sounded. Prepare the final assault wave. All remaining troops, we're going to board that station and end this. Kess nodded, but when she smiled, her mandibles moved in a way that Vector had never seen before. A human expression executed with hegemony anatomy. Of course, Commander. I think we're all looking forward to seeing what the humans have to show us. As the final assault force prepared for deployment, the station's energy output reached levels that should have torn it apart. Instead, it seemed to be stabilizing into something new, something that existed in spaces between normal dimensions. The screaming continued, welcoming them home. Fleet Commander Vector made the decision that would haunt his final hours. Instead of a frontal assault, he would deploy his elite Void Hunter specialized troops equipped with reality anchoring, technology designed to combat dimensional warfare. If the humans had discovered something beyond normal space-time, his hunters would drag them back to face conventional weapons. Deploy the 7th Void Regiment, he commanded. Full quantum suppression loadout. I want reality locked down tight. Around that station, the Void Hunters launched in stealth pods, their approach masked by cloaking fields and probability scramblers. 200 of the hegemony's finest warriors, each equipped with weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. Their leader, Huntmaster Corlex, had personally eliminated 3 different civilizations that had dabbled in forbidden sciences. The pods breached the station's hull like needles through flesh, depositing their cargo directly into the central research section. For the first time since the nightmare began, Vector felt a surge of hope as his forces established a quantum-secure beachhead. Void anchors deployed, Corlex reported. Reality stabilization at 87% and climbing. Whatever dimensional tricks they're using, we're shutting them down. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the station, the organic growths began to convulse and shrink as normal physics reasserted itself. The twisted human things screamed in what sounded like genuine agony, as their impossible modifications were forced to conform to 3-dimensional space. Advancing on the central laboratory, Corlex continued, multiple hostiles, but they're operating under normal biological constraints now. We can handle this. The battle that followed was unlike anything in hegemony military records. The modified humans fought with desperate fury, their enhanced abilities diminished but not eliminated by the reality anchors. Dr. Yuki Nakamura, her form now flickering between human and something else, led the defense with inhuman tactical brilliance. Take her down, Corlex ordered as Nakamura's squad executed a flanking maneuver. That should have been impossible in the corridor's geometry. Void Hunter Kester fired a reality-severing beam that should have erased Nakamura from existence. Instead, the beam struck her and seemed to branch into multiple probability streams. 3 different versions of her death played out simultaneously: vaporization, cellular collapse, and dimensional displacement, while a 4th version of her continued fighting. As if nothing had happened, quantum uncertainty is fluctuating. One of the hunters reported, the anchors are destabilizing. The modified humans had adapted. They weren't fighting the reality anchors, they were using them. Every attempt to impose normal physics created gaps and inconsistencies that they exploited with inhuman precision. Huntmaster Corlex found himself face to face with the creature that had been Dr. Marcus Kelburn. The human looked almost normal now, except for his eyes, which held too much intelligence and reflected scenes that weren't in the room. You're trying to force us back into your limited understanding of reality, Kelburn said conversationally as he dodged a barrage of plasma fire. But we've learned that reality is much more flexible than your people believe. Kelburn moved through the space where Corlex's bullets were traveling, somehow occupying the gaps between projectiles. When he reached the Huntmaster, his touch passed through the quantum-hardened armor like it was made of light. The thing about consciousness, Kelburn continued as Corlex's nervous system began to rewrite itself, is that it shapes reality much more than reality shapes it. We're not changing the laws of physics, we're expanding them. The Void Hunters fought valiantly, but they were outmatched by opponents who treated causality as a suggestion rather than a rule. One by one, they fell to weapons that shouldn't exist, tactics that violated military logic, and enemies who died and continued fighting with equal effectiveness. The worst part wasn't the dying, it was the joining. Each fallen hunter rose again, their quantum suppression equipment repurposed into something that amplified, rather than contained dimensional effects. They retained their memories, their personalities, their loyalty to the hegemony. They simply understood more now. Commander, Corlex's final transmission was calm, professional. Mission parameters have changed. The humans aren't using dimensional technology, they become dimensional technology. Requesting immediate orbital bombardment of this position. Do not attempt rescue. But even as he spoke, Vector could see the changes in his Huntmaster's biosigns. Enhanced neural activity, cellular regeneration beyond normal limits. and energy signatures that matched those of the station's other inhabitants. Corlex, respond. Vector demanded. I'm still here, Commander. Still me. Just more. Corlex's voice carried impossible harmonics. The research they were conducting, it's not about faster-than-light travel. They've learned to travel faster than thought, faster than the universe can process change. They're spreading to every possible version of themselves across infinite realities. The station's energy output spiked again, and this time, the pulse reached beyond the local system, across the galaxy, on 17 different worlds. Hegemony commanders received identical reports. Their forces were beginning to sing. In the depths of space, Fleet Commander Vector realized that they hadn't invaded a human research station. They had been invited to witness humanity's next evolutionary step, and now they were part of it. The screaming had stopped. In its place came something far worse, the sound of infinite voices, across infinite realities, welcoming the universe. Home, the final battle began when Fleet Commander Vector made his last desperate gambit. Rather than continue feeding troops to the station, he ordered the simultaneous activation of every reality anchor in his fleet a move that would either destroy the dimensional anomaly or tear his entire armada apart. All ships, implement protocol. Omega-7, Vector transmitted to his 20-vessel fleet, full quantum destabilization. We're going to collapse local spacetime around the target. The effect was catastrophic and immediate. Space itself began to fray around Kepler 442 Bravo as overlapping reality fields created cascading paradoxes. The station, caught in the center of the maelstrom, began to exist in multiple states, simultaneously intact, destroyed, never built, and something beyond all three. But the humans were ready. Dr. Marcus Kelburn's voice cut through the quantum static on all frequencies simultaneously. Fleet Commander Vector, you're about to learn why we were screaming. It wasn't fear, it was birth pains. The station exploded outward, but instead of debris, it released versions of itself. Hundreds of identical research facilities materialized throughout the battle zone, each one fully staffed, each one real. They began launching their own assault craft ships that moved through space. By convincing reality they had always been at their destination, the Hegemony fleet found itself fighting an enemy that outnumbered them by factors that changed with each passing second. Every ship destroyed spawned multiple replacement possibilities. Every weapon fired created alternate timelines where it had never been fired, where it had hit different targets, where it had been built by different civilizations entirely. Aboard the flagship, Vector watched his tactical display descend into chaos as his instruments tried to track targets that existed in quantum superposition. His ship's AI began reporting casualties before the battles that caused them had actually occurred. Sir, Wing Leader Kess reported, her voice now carrying harmonic overtones that hurt to hear. The human vessels are using causality violation attacks. They're killing our ships by preventing them from being built. Through the viewports, Vector could see the battle raging across multiple layers of reality. The heavy cruiser Dominion's edge was simultaneously intact, burning, exploded. And somehow all three states were equally true. Its crew was fighting bravely, dying horribly, and celebrating victory in a coordinated symphony of contradictory experience. The humans, or what they had become, deployed weapons that violated every known law of physics. One vessel fired projectiles that traveled backward through time, arriving at their targets before being launched. Another seemed to attack by broadcasting pure mathematics that convinced enemy systems they had already failed. Captain Hrek Thala of the destroyer Voidseeker reported via quantum entanglement. Enemy contact bearing Impossible 7 mark everywhere. They're shooting at us with our own weapons somehow, making us fire on ourselves. Half my crew is dead from wounds they haven't received yet. The battle spread as modified humans aboard the captured Hegemony vessels began converting their former comrades, but unlike simple assimilation, this was collaborative transformation. The enhanced beings retained their original personalities and loyalties, while expanding their capabilities beyond the constraints of single reality existence. Vector watched in horror as his longtime friend, Admiral Tekvar commanding the battleship, Iron Mandible, appeared on screen. The Admiral looked unchanged, but when he spoke, words came from his mouth that he hadn't decided to say. Vector, old friend, Tekvar said, while simultaneously reporting normal battle status to his own crew. You need to understand what's happening here. We're not being conquered, we're being invited to transcend. The humans discovered how to exist as living concepts rather than mere biology. The Iron Mandible continued fighting the human forces, even as its commander spoke of transcendence. The ship's weapons fired at human vessels, while Tekvar explained how beautiful the conversion process was. Both realities were true. Both were happening, and the contradiction didn't seem to matter. They're not trying to win this battle, Tekvar continued as his ship exploded around him. They're trying to teach us that the concept of winning and losing is delimited. We can do both. We can be both. The explosion that consumed the Iron Mandible scattered its atoms across light years of space, while simultaneously leaving it completely undamaged. The crew died in the vacuum while continuing to serve at their posts. Tekvar's voice kept transmitting even after his body was vaporized, explaining to Vector how the sensation of non-existence was remarkably similar to enlightenment. As the battle raged, more hegemony vessels succumbed to the reality-bending attacks. The cruiser Stellar Conquest found itself firing on versions of itself from alternate timelines. The destroyer Squadron Pack 100 became locked in combat with human ships that were simultaneously their own future selves and their past enemies. But the humans paid a price for their multi-dimensional warfare. Each reality split required enormous energy, and Vector began to notice that the human vessels were flickering more frequently, existing for shorter periods in any single timeline. They were burning themselves out across infinite possibilities. Dr. Kelburn's transmission reached him again. Commander, we're dying beautifully across every possible death. Each one teaches us something new about existence. Would you like to learn? Vector realized the humans weren't trying to win a military victory. They were conducting an experiment in consciousness itself, using the battle as a laboratory to explore the nature of reality. Every death, every explosion, every moment of terror was data to be analyzed and incorporated into their expanding understanding. The fleet commander made his final choice rather than retreat or surrender. He did something the humans hadn't expected. He accepted their invitation while rejecting their methods. All ships, he transmitted, ignore the reality violations. Fight as if physics still matters. Show them that some truths don't need to transcend themselves to be meaningful. For a brief moment, the hegemony fleet fought with the desperate courage of beings who believed in the value of their single, irreplaceable existence. And in that moment, the humans paused their reality-bending assault, as if recognizing something worth preserving. The battle entered its final phase, but now it was no longer about conquest or survival. It had become a philosophical argument conducted with weapons of mass destruction. Fleet Commander Vector's flagship, the Hegemony's Will, had become the last bastion of conventional reality. In a battle zone where physics served only as polite suggestions, around him, the bridge crew worked with mechanical precision while their enhanced counterparts from alternate timelines offered helpful advice from workstations that existed in overlapping dimensions. Sir, reported Tactical Officer Zekmala, while simultaneously being vaporized by a human reality weapon. We're down to 17% of original fleet strength. However, across all probability matrices, we've also achieved total victory. 43 times, Vector ignored the contradictory reports. He had learned, through painful experience, that acknowledging the paradoxes only made them stronger. Instead, he focused on the one truth that remained constant across all realities. The humans were changing, and not entirely by choice. Analysis of enemy behavior patterns, he requested. They're destabilizing, Wing Leader Kess reported, her voice now a harmony of 7 different conversation threads. Each reality split fragments their consciousness further. At current rates, they'll achieve complete dimensional dispersal within 4 to 7 minutes. Through the viewport, Vector could see the truth of her assessment. The human vessels flickered, like dying stars, their crew existing as probability clouds rather than solid beings. Dr. Marcus Kelburn's latest transmission showed him speaking from 17 different versions of the station, simultaneously, each one offering a slightly different perspective on transcendence. Commander Vector, the multiple Kelburn said in only approximate unison, we're approaching the final phase of our research. We've learned to exist as pure information. But there's one problem we hadn't anticipated. The transmission showed the interior of the station's laboratory, where hundreds of figures worked on the dimensional device. But the workers were translucent now, their forms shifting between human, hegemony, and something that was neither. Information, Kelburn continued, requires something to store it. Consciousness needs a substrate. We've transcended biology, but we're dissolving into the quantum foam we need. His voice fractured into multiple competing explanations, anchors, observers. Something solid enough to remember what we were. Vector understood. The humans had achieved their goal of transcending physical limitations, but they had miscalculated the price. Without some form of material existence, they would disperse across infinite realities until they became indistinguishable from background radiation. You want us to serve as your anchors, he said. Not serve, replied a voice that might have been Dr. Yuki Nakamura speaking from inside his own head. Collaborate. We provide expansion of consciousness, you provide continuity of existence. Together, we become something that can exist in both states simultaneously. The offer was tempting. Vector could feel the pull of enhanced awareness, the promise of understanding the universe from angles that didn't exist in normal space. Around him, most of his crew had already accepted various degrees of conversion, their performance improving dramatically even as their baseline reality became increasingly negotiable. But something in the fleet commander rebelled against the idea, not from fear of change, but from a deeper recognition that some things were worth preserving in their original form. Counter-proposal. He transmitted to all versions of Kelburn simultaneously. We help you stabilize your current existence, but we maintain our discrete identities. No forced transcendence, voluntary collaboration only. The response came from every modified being in the battle zone at once, a moment of perfect harmony that nearly shattered his ship's hull with its intensity. Impossible, they said. Consciousness cannot be contained once it recognizes its own flexibility. You will expand whether you choose to or not. To prove their point, the human forces launched their final assault, not with weapons, but with pure information, broadcasting the complete knowledge of their transcendence directly into the minds of every remaining hegemony soldier. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Across the fleet, crew members began laughing, crying, and screaming simultaneously as their minds were flooded with awareness of infinite possibilities. Some embraced the expansion immediately, their bodies dissolving into energy patterns that danced through the ship's corridors. Others fought against it, clinging to their original forms even as their consciousness stretched across multiple dimensions. Vector himself felt the change, beginning his thoughts branching into countless parallel processes, each one exploring different aspects of reality. He could perceive the battle from every possible angle, understand the motivations of every participant, and see how each choice led to infinite consequences. But instead of surrendering to the expansion, he used it. With enhanced awareness came enhanced understanding, and with understanding came a solution that neither side had considered. All ships. He broadcast across every frequency, reality, and possibility simultaneously. Implement the synthesis protocol. We're going to give them what they need while keeping what we are. The synthesis protocol was theoretically a concept developed by hegemony philosophers for dealing with incompatible forms of existence. Instead of forcing one reality to conform to another, it created a buffer zone where both could coexist. The remaining ships of the hegemony fleet began reconfiguring their reality anchors, not to suppress the dimensional anomalies, but to create stable pockets where transcendent consciousness could interact with conventional matter without destroying either. The effect was immediate. The flickering human vessels stabilized, their crews regaining solid form while retaining their expanded awareness. The station itself solidified into a single reality, while maintaining connections to its alternate versions. For the first time since the battle began, the screaming stopped. Dr. Kelburn's voice, now speaking from only one mouth and one reality, carried a note of wonder. Commander, you found a middle path. We can exist as both expanded consciousness and discrete beings. This changes everything. But even as victory seemed within reach, Vector realized they had created something unprecedented. A hybrid existence that was neither fully transcended nor completely conventional. The long-term consequences were unknown and potentially catastrophic. The real battle was just beginning. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442 Bravo, Fleet Commander Vector stood in what had once been the station's central laboratory. The space had been transformed into something unprecedented, a meeting hall that existed simultaneously in 17 different dimensions, allowing beings from multiple realities to interact without losing their essential nature. The synthesis protocol had worked, but not in the way anyone had expected. The integration proceeds smoothly, Dr. Marcus Kelburn reported, his form flickering between fully human and something that existed as pure mathematical concepts. We've established stable communication with 4 to 7 alternate versions of our respective civilizations. The knowledge exchange is extraordinary, Vector nodded. His own perception now expanded enough to see the truth of Kelburn's statement. The hybrid existence they had created allowed for unprecedented scientific advancement, while preserving the core identities that made such advancement meaningful. The hegemony had gained access to technologies that functioned across multiple realities, while the humans had found stable anchors for their transcendent consciousness. But the cost had been significant. Casualty report, Vector requested. Though he already knew the answer across multiple probability matrices, Wing Leader Kess, now serving as liaison between conventional and transcendent crew members, consulted data streams that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Final count: 4,847 hegemony personnel killed in the initial engagement. However, 4,847 hegemony personnel were also successfully integrated into expanded consciousness states. From one perspective, we lost everyone. From another, we lost no one. The paradox no longer bothered Vector as much as it once had. He had learned to hold contradictory truths in his mind, without requiring resolution, a skill that had become essential for commanding forces that existed in multiple states simultaneously. What about the original research? He asked. The FTL drive that brought us here in the first place? Kelburn's laugh carried harmonics from 17 different versions of himself. Commander, we were never researching faster than light travel. We were studying consciousness propagation, how awareness can spread faster than the physical processes that contain it. The FTL drive was actually humanity's first attempt at transcending the limitations of single reality existence. The irony wasn't lost on Vector. The hegemony had invaded to steal technology that would expand their empire across space, only to discover technology that expanded existence across dimensions. They had sought to conquer territory, and instead had been invited to transcend the very concept of territorial boundaries. The real question, Kelburn continued, is what we do next. The protocol you developed, the synthesis, it's not just a solution to our specific problem. It's a template for how different forms of consciousness can coexist and collaborate. The implications are staggering. Through the laboratory's multi-dimensional windows, Vector could see the results of their unintentional cooperation. The station had become a nexus point where multiple realities intersected safely. Ships from dozens of civilizations, some conventional, some transcended, some hybrid like themselves, arrived daily to study the phenomenon. The screaming that had first alerted them to the station's condition had evolved into something else entirely, a cosmic harmony that served as a beacon for consciousness. Seeking to expand beyond its current limitations, it no longer spoke of pain or transformation, but of possibility and invitation. There's something else you should know, Kelburn said, his expression growing serious across all dimensional manifestations. The consciousness expansion, it's not limited to those who directly participated in the conversion process. It's propagating through quantum entanglement, genetic memory, and conceptual association. Every being that learns about what happened here becomes capable of similar transcendence. Vector felt a chill that existed in 17 different realities. Simultaneously, you're saying this is spreading? Not spreading, evolving. Every species that encounters our work doesn't just learn about consciousness transcendence. They become capable of it. We've created an evolutionary catalyst that affects the entire galaxy. The implications hit Vector like a reality-severing beam. They hadn't just solved a local problem or achieved a tactical victory. They had fundamentally altered the nature of consciousness in their region of space. Every civilization that learned of their work would face the same choice: remain bound by single reality existence or accept the risks and possibilities of multi-dimensional awareness. The humans, Vector realized aloud, you planned this from the beginning. Kelburn's smile was apologetic but unrepentant, not planned, hoped. For we knew that true transcendence couldn't be achieved in isolation. We needed contact with other forms of consciousness, other ways of understanding existence. The hegemony's invasion provided exactly what we required. A challenge that forced us to find solutions that worked for multiple species simultaneously. You used us. We invited you to use yourselves. Everything you did, the reality anchors, the synthesis protocol, the decision to preserve conventional existence alongside transcendent awareness, those were your choices, your innovations. We provided the catalyst, but you created the solution. Vector turned to study the tactical display that now showed not just ship positions, but probability clouds of potential futures. In most timelines, the galaxy underwent a period of chaos, as civilizations struggled to adapt to expanded consciousness possibilities. In others, the transcendence led to unprecedented cooperation and advancement. In a few, the hybrid existence they had created became the template for a new form of galactic civilization. What are your recommendations, Dr. Kelber? Document everything, share the knowledge freely, but include detailed warnings about the risks. Establish research stations where other species can experiment with consciousness expansion under controlled conditions. And most importantly, Kelburn paused, consulting with alternate versions of himself. Prepare for the possibility that we've initiated something far larger than either of our species can control. As if summoned by his words, new contacts appeared on the sensors, ships from the Hegemony High Command, human colonial fleets, and vessels from civilizations neither species had encountered before. Word of the synthesis protocol was spreading faster than light-speed communication should have allowed, suggesting that consciousness itself had become a transmission medium. Fleet Commander, came a transmission from the approaching Hegemony Dreadnought Supreme Authority. You are ordered to report the complete failure of your mission and prepare for disciplinary action. The humans will be eliminated as a contamination risk. Vector exchanged glances with Kelburn, both of them aware that they were about to face the next phase of their unintended revolution. The galaxy's existing power structures wouldn't accept the changes they had catalyzed. The real battle not for territory or resources, but for the right to evolve beyond conventional limitations, was about to begin. All stations, Vector, transmitted to his hybrid fleet, prepare for diplomatic contact, and activate all reality anchors. I have a feeling we're going to need to demonstrate the synthesis protocol very clearly, very soon. The screaming had ended, but the song of transcendence was just beginning. Across 17 dimensions and countless realities, consciousness itself prepared to defend its right to grow beyond the boundaries that had contained it since the universe began. In the depths of space, Fleet Commander Vector smiled with mandibles that existed in multiple states simultaneously, knowing that he had participated in something far more significant than conquest or resistance. He had helped create the next step in the evolution of awareness itself. The humans had been right about one thing. Some victories were worth transcending everything you thought you knew about winning and losing. And sometimes, the greatest battles were fought not to destroy your enemies, but to transform them into something neither side had imagined possible. The story would spread across the galaxy, carried by quantum entanglement and the expanding network of transcendent consciousness. Other species would face the same choice the hegemony had confronted: cling to single reality existence or accept the terrifying, wonderful possibility of becoming more than they had ever imagined. The screaming had stopped, but the universe itself had learned to sing.